Okay, welcome back to episode 3 of Lake Life, Idaho. I'm your host, Keith, and this is your other host, Randy. We're going to talk about, in this episode, when we went to Idaho, what we looked for, and we'll start off with a recap of how we ended up with Idaho and show you a copy of the spreadsheet currently on how we got there and how we narrowed it down and all the factors that we used to look at Idaho as the next place after we went to Michigan. So one of the main reasons we went to Idaho was the price per acre. It was between $11,000 and $20,000 depending on the property. The one downside is that snowfall was pretty high, but there were 36 livable weeks of the year in Idaho. And the temperature, the average wasn't very high. It was like 82 degrees as a high. And also, like where we were looking at in Idaho, in northern Idaho, there's a hospital about 20 minutes away from everywhere that we were looking. The city of Sandpoint is where we started zeroing in on there in Coeur d'Alene. And it was above 5,000 residents, which was kind of our number that we were looking for. They also had quality restaurants, and you could do mountains in the winter and you could do the lake in the summer. So it was really like a four seasons type of place that you could find things to do. And it wouldn't be a ghost town in one of the seasons. Obviously, we'd want to do summer boating and then winter skiing at Schweitzer Mountain. Also, some of the big benefits were some of the taxes. So like income tax was only 6.5%. Sales tax was pretty low, it was like 6%. And then the county taxes on property was really good. So we were looking in Bonner County, and the property tax was 0.47%, which having a house in Baltimore. In comparison, it was like no tax because it was ridiculous on how much you get taxed there. And then it was also the third cheapest place in the United States for power in the entire nation. And as things become more electric, we figured that was going to be a larger and larger factor if we didn't go off the grid completely if we built a house. So that's how we narrowed down Idaho. We started looking at Sandpoint, so we went out to Sandpoint online and we looked around, and I found this place called Apollo Lane, and it was awesome. Like, it was a huge view of the Lake Ponderay. It was like a bunch of acres, it was like 7 acres.
13 acres.
Oh, 13 acres.
He was obsessed with Apollo.
It was the first time I'd seen the view of the mountains and lake in Idaho. So I like any other noob, I just clicked the button like contact the realtor. The realtor just happened to be Chris Neu. So Chris Neu is actually who we ended up going with when we were in Idaho because he was so helpful along the process. Once I contacted him, he set us up with a portal online, and he would just add things to that portal for us to look at. Very common to what other realtors do. But it kept us looking at properties, get an idea for cost, get us an idea for like where properties were being sold at and what they were being sold for. But this was right before like everybody started buying land up in the United States before COVID happened. So the prices were a lot cheaper. Inflation hasn't caught up to what happened in the real estate market. So it was a really good time to look and buy. So we set up a date to go visit and meet with Chris and go see properties. So we flew out to Idaho.
We set the date for when we thought the pandemic would be over. Because they had just started doing the 15 days to flatten the curve. And we were like, this is like a few months out. It'll be gone by then.
Yeah, so we went out to Idaho, and we had a list of properties that we wanted to look at, and then we met with Chris, and then Chris is like, I don't know, you don't want to look at those properties. Let me tell you why. Like snow density, power, water, sewer problems, ease of building in that area versus another area. Like he was an expert. He knew the area. And to me, that was the most valuable takeaway is find a realtor that knows the area. Find a realtor that has done construction in the area or has a background in that. Because when you're building in rural areas, you as a city slicker aren't going to know like how to dig a well or bring in septic or all the trials and tribulations of snowfall on one side of a lake versus the other in somewhere like in Idaho. We looked at the Sago area, which was on the west side of Lake Ponderay, and we were looking at the Hope area, which is on the east side of Lake Ponderay. And those were two very different snowfall accumulation concepts because some of it was southern facing or northern facing, eastern, western, depending on where the sun came down or came up and came around the lake, and how snow would have come in for like a big snowstorm.
Yeah, this experience changed how I value realtors because coming from the city, we really felt that realtors didn't have a place anymore, because all you need is somebody to unlock the door. If you have a code, you can look at the house yourself. You can look at all the records on the house yourself. And we were like, do we need a realtor? Because in Michigan, we didn't have one. We just drove around the properties. We got permission first and looked at them, and that's all we needed, and then we could go. So we were trying to be all independent about it, and thank God we got a good realtor, because we would have bought a property where you have to plow 3 times a day to get off of your property in winter, and then plow to come back, because the snow would have accumulated by the time you went to town and back. It would have been completely untenable. We wouldn't have lived there in winter. So that's why it was so cheap also. Follow-up questions. How bad is it in winter? Because we saw a fuckload of firewood piled up by one of the houses, like 5 winters of what I thought firewood was necessary.
Yeah, so we went out and we looked at a couple of properties on our own. One of them was called Cherokee, and it was this giant overlook that looked across the Monarch Mountains. But it took like 30 minutes to get up to the top of the mountain.
Now would not be the time to take a sip. Just stop. Stop.
And then we had to like hike from the car to where the spot was. And it was an amazing view, and there was like bald eagles flying everywhere.
Best view ever.
And it was an amazing view, but how do you build a house on that? We almost had to helicopter like pieces to this place just to like build something there. And we knew that we would have to set up some sort of like tram, no lie, tram up the side of the mountain, which we wouldn't even owned. We'd had to work something out, an easement or something, to be able to like basically take like a cable car up to the property, which that's not realistic. That's a couple of millions of dollars.
It's James Bond style living right there.
And that's not the budget that we were going for. Another area we looked at was Camp Bay. Camp Bay now is this like controversial area where a developer came in, bought an entire Bay area up, and they're building their own community. So there's a lot of like water rights issues that are going on right now in Camp Bay. But it was an empty slate, and there was 20, 40 acre properties that they were looking at selling. They hadn't really stuck prices to. We ended up putting an offer in there, but what they had wanted for their property was a lot different than I think our realtor thought the value was there and what we would have valued the property at.
Yeah, we never spoke to them, but I got the impression that they straight up laughed at us. They were like, no, this will be for billionaires. You can leave.
So Camp Bay didn't work out. There was another property we looked at on Harlan's Trail, which is in Sago, and I really loved that property. It was like a 20-acre property. It was being sold by the owner, and it was like completely wooded. We drove out there, and it was dirt roads on the way out. We had to like off-road to get to the land. We had to hike through it. We ran
in our little rental car.
We had a tiny little rental car. We ran into a wild moose on like hiking to it.
She's looking at us. I can't believe you found a moose. I'm gonna go real slow.
That was real, right?
Yes. Yeah, you found.
Yeah, that sounds stupid.
No. We've never seen one up close. It's kind of a little one, I think. Wow. Yeah, it's a moose.
And we asked Chris about like building at Harlan's Trail, and he said it's great if you want to be snowed in for the winter.
Yeah.
And that's where the snow really became a factor in the properties that we were looking at. He said you're going to be constantly removing snow during big snowstorms. You're going to be snowed in this location because there's no primary, secondary, or tertiary roads that get plowed, and you won't be able to get from your house to a plowed road. So just plan on buckling in until everything melts. So that wasn't a great thing either. It was a great view if you cleared the trees and you brought in, power and water and sewage and all that good stuff. But you were starting with a blank canvas with a lot of land. It would have been a cool project, but realistically, the snow would have really killed us.
Yeah, and it was such a good deal. It was so cheap per acre. But when we calculated average cost for a well, average cost for a road per mile, average cost for electric, and put all that on, it's more expensive than other properties that already had that done for you. So.
We also looked at Eureka. Eureka is down the road from Harlan's Trail. There's a lot of properties that are being sold there. I mean, what we were really going for is what kind of view of the lake did we have? We even went down to Coeur d'Alene and we looked at a couple of properties on that lake. The properties were smaller, more expensive, but they also had a really nice view of the lake. But you weren't as secluded, and we wanted a little more seclusion. We wanted to feel like we're on our property and we wouldn't see our neighbors. So then we looked on the other side of the water of Lake Pend Oreille in the Hope area, and then all the way down to, what's that area called? South of Hope, so East Hope, and then down south of that, almost towards Montana, there just wasn't as many properties to look at. You have southern exposure there, so there's less snow, which was a good thing, and that's kind of where we started focusing in on. So the views also change at the time of the year. So when you have snow cover or you have the trees that shed, what will your view be like then? You have to factor all of that kind of things in. When things start blooming again, what grows in and what blocks your view? What are you willing to clear out? How many trees are you going to take down? Because all that adds up to cost. And then you have to really think about sun rotation, which I would have never thought of. Where does the sun rise? How long does it take to get around your property? How much snow or how much sun are you going to have on that property all day long? Is that going to be too hot? Is it going to be too cold? How do you put up solar if you want it solar? What time does the sun rise and the sun set? In northern Idaho, it can rise really early.
It's like 3 a.m.
When we were there, it was super early. We're like, what's wrong with this place?
It's like Alaska.
We live in Japan now, and it also rises at like 4:30 in the morning, and we still say, what the heck's wrong with this place? The sun should rise when we get up out of bed, I think. But that's what we had to factor in. So when we went to Idaho, we looked at all of those things, and you'll see in other episodes that we cover all the different factors that you need the power, the septic versus having sewage brought to your house, if that's even possible, what kind of power systems you're going to put in, whether it's solar or electric off the grid, what kind of battery banks you can have in your house, and then also just like day-to-day things that you need to think of. The property we ended up going with has a really long driveway. How are we going to remove snow off of a really long, steep driveway? We don't have an answer for that yet. But when we went to Idaho, we loved it enough, and we put in 3 offers because we found 3 properties that we really liked. One was the property that got accepted and then we ended up purchasing. Another was a property right above it that somebody else had already put an all-cash offer in, and they were actually on the property when we were looking at it. We just didn't know the details behind it. And then we put an offer in Camp Bay, and they laughed at that offer.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about how putting in offers worked, especially in this time, how we got pre-qualified. And then in later episodes, we'll talk about how the banking structure works for rural land. Totally different than getting a mortgage for a house. And that's important to know going into this because there's very limited opportunities to buy bare land by using financing. So we'll cover that in those episodes.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks, guys, and we'll see you in the next episode.